The radio hissed through layers of static before a strained voice broke in, saying they had lost visual. The recon team froze, eyes narrowing behind dusty goggles, scanning the endless horizon that shimmered under the heat. It was late afternoon on the northern plateau of Afghanistan, the light thinning as walls of dust began to roll in from the west. The sky was the color of brass, heavy with grit, and every movement felt slower under the weight of the storm. Inside the forward operations post, Captain Daniel Walker leaned over the comm console, his jaw set tight. The drone feed had gone black 2 minutes ago, and months of coordinated surveillance now hung by a thread. He called for updates, his voice sharp but steady, the kind of tone that masked frustration behind protocol. Around him, the analysts worked in tense silence, their monitors flickering with useless static. Then the channel shifted. A new voice came through, soft and steady, cutting clean through the noise. Hold channel. For a second, no one moved. The command post stilled, as if the storm itself had paused. 3 seconds passed before that same calm voice returned. I have acquisition. The entire room turned toward the sound, and silence took over again. The forward operating base sat on the edge of the northern plateau, a cluster of concrete walls and antenna towers surrounded by endless desert. Inside the command post, the air buzzed with the low hum of equipment and the clipped rhythm of radio chatter. The recon unit in the field had gone silent after losing visual contact, and the drone feed had been dead since 2:30 p.m. when the first wave of dust rolled across the mountains. Captain Daniel Walker stood at the center table, headset pressed against his ear, listening to broken transmissions as the storm interfered with the signal. Copy last. Say again, he said, his voice firm, but even a static answered him. Then fragments of the recon team's report came through, unreadable. Walker turned to his second-in-command, a calm lieutenant named Harris, and ordered a comm check across all frequencies. Negative response from Overwatch. No drone feed. No satellite relay. Harris repeated the calls with professional rhythm, his tone steady, despite the tension in the room. The analyst pulled up old satellite imagery, updating coordinates manually, while an intelligence officer recalculated possible escape routes based on terrain and timing. The target was a courier carrying encrypted data on weapon shipments. If he crossed the border, the entire operation would collapse. Walker looked at the mission clock, watching seconds tick away. Every decision ran through him, every command filtered by rank and protocol. He gave short, precise orders: hold position, maintain radio silence until confirmation, stand by for Overwatch input. Around him, the team moved with trained efficiency, masking the pressure under routine. Yet beneath the quiet professionalism, everyone knew what was at stake. One mistake, one missed visual, and months of work would vanish into the storm. Her name carried weight long before anyone heard her voice again. Master Sergeant Rachel Raven Price, call sign Raven 3, had served 18 years across multiple theaters. From early deployments with conventional infantry to covert assignments under the Joint Special Operations Command, she had graduated top of her class from the Advanced Sniper course at Fort Benning, later serving as an instructor, before being pulled into operations that demanded extreme range precision. Those who had worked near her described her as steady and exact, a professional who spoke little but calculated everything. 3 years earlier, she had vanished from active deployment after a classified mission known only by a code name, sealed behind command-level clearance. Officially, she was listed as reassigned to a non-combat advisory role. Unofficially, she had become a story whispered through the sniper community, a name that lingered like a rumor with too much truth behind it. New recruits heard about the woman who never missed, but the veterans spoke of something deeper: her discipline, her patience, her refusal to fire unless absolutely necessary. Now, as her calm voice resurfaced on a channel that should have been silent, The room shifted. Analysts paused mid-keystroke. And even Captain Walker's posture changed. The presence of Raven 3 was not announced or celebrated. It was simply felt like gravity returning to a system that had been unstable without her. Raven lay flat against the sand, her movements deliberate and unhurried. In front of her rested a Chaytak M200 intervention chambered in 408 Chaytak, the rifle built for distance and precision. The match-grade barrel had been recut and tuned to her specifications, its chamber polished to reduce friction and stabilize pressure. Every round in her hand-loaded batch had been weighed to the tenth of a grain, each identical in burn rate and seating depth, ensuring muzzle velocity remained constant within a few feet per second. The rifle sat on an Atlas bipod. Its legs dug slightly into the earth to counter recoil drift. She adjusted the rear shooting bag beneath the stock, pressing it until the crosshairs of her Nightforce ATACR 7-35x56 scope aligned with the ridgeline. The wind hissed across the metal housing of the optic, a soft, ghostly tone that carried through her hearing protection. She raised the Leica Rangemaster CRF laser rangefinder, took 3 readings, and averaged the result 4,752 yards. The data fed into her Kestrel 5,700 ballistic meter, the display flashing numbers that translated physics into human judgment. She entered values for density altitude, barometric pressure, humidity, and temperature. The solver calculated elevation, spin drift, and Coriolis correction. Every factor converted into clicks she would apply to her turrets. She turned the elevation knob, counting each metallic click as her gloved fingers brushed fine grains of sand from the surface. Then she aligned the rifle into the wind, making minute adjustments until the reticle settled, steady and centered. The plateau around her was quiet, except for the wind and her breathing. Each action was practiced, measured, and precise. The product of years of repetition, until the process became a kind of meditation science meeting instinct in perfect balance. Raven steadied the rifle and lifted her Leica Rangemaster CRF. The digital readout confirming the same number 3 times in a row, 4,752 yards. She logged it mentally before checking her Kestrel 5,700 ballistic meter, its small screen glowing in the fading light. The display showed density altitude, temperature, humidity, and barometric pressure, each factor shifting slightly as the wind changed direction. She entered every value into her ballistic solver, her fingers moving without hesitation. The way a pianist plays scales after years of repetition. Through her scope, she studied the mirage patterns rippling across the plateau. The waves of distortion bent left, then steadied. The surface wind registered at 8 knots from the southwest, but she knew that would change higher up. Using dust patterns and the way dry scrub bent along the ridge, she estimated wind shear at different elevations, adding fractions to each entry in her log. Every number mattered. Every estimate, a small variable in a complex equation of motion, pressure, and time. The solver produced a final solution, a specific elevation correction in mils, and a lateral adjustment for wind drift. Raven turned the elevation turret, counting the clicks under her breath, then adjusted the windage knob by 0.5 mil to the right. The metallic sound of the turrets was faint but distinct, a quiet rhythm in the stillness. She checked time of flight in her head, roughly 5.5 seconds, long enough for wind to shift the bullet by several feet if her math was wrong. She slowed her breathing, feeling her pulse settle until her heart beat steady and slow. In her mind, she could already see the bullet's path. An invisible arc, bending through air and gravity. Numbers became instinct. Instinct became control. Inside the command post, the tension felt thick enough to cut through. The lights flickered against the sand-choked air filters as static filled the radio. Captain Daniel Walker stood over the operations table, headset pressed tight, the sound of his own heartbeat rising against the steady hum of equipment. The drone visuals were gone. Visibility was collapsing, and without a secondary asset to confirm the target, the entire mission balanced on one voice in the desert. Raven 3 came through the secondary channel. Her tone even and calm. Target confirmed. Male. Blue jacket. Satellite phone in left hand. Walking east, northeast. Positive identification. Walker hesitated, glancing at the clock. Less than 4 minutes before the courier would cross the border and disappear for good, he looked to the intelligence analyst for confirmation. The analyst, pale under the screen's glow, whispered the obvious. Her record is perfect. Zero misses. Every engagement confirmed. Walker keyed his mic again. His words measured and clipped. Raven 3. Confirm PID. Confirm range and wind. A pause. Then her quiet reply. Copy. Target confirmed. Conditions stable. The silence that followed was longer than it should have been. Everyone in the room waited, understanding what authorization meant. Walker exhaled slowly, weighing the risk against the months of work on the line. Engage on my discretion. Make it count. Her reply came instantly, steady and controlled. Copy. Engaging. The room went still. The countdown began. 3 minutes until history would decide whether it was luck or precision that defined her legend. Raven had not moved in 6 hours. Her body pressed into the coarse ground. Invisible under layers of dust and camouflage netting, the wind swept across the plateau, carrying grains of sand that hissed softly against her rifle's barrel. Beneath the wind, her breath stayed slow, controlled, unshaken. The rangefinder confirmed the number again, 4,752 yards. Her scope was dialed in for both elevation and windage. Every adjustment exact. Every click deliberate. She studied the target through the Night Force optic. The man moved across the ridge. Stopping to glance at his phone, the wind shifted again. Gusting at 8 knots. Raven noted it. Waited. Then let it settle back to 6. Her finger rested against the trigger, but she did not rush. Her breathing dropped until her pulse barely registered. Her heart rate slowing below 50 beats per minute. The world narrowed to a circle of glass and crosshairs. She exhaled halfway and held the pause. The trigger broke with a clean snap. The recoil was smooth. The sound crisp and brief before the wind swallowed it. The bullet left the barrel at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Spinning so fast it hummed invisibly through the air. It climbed slightly, arced, and began its long descent. For 5 seconds, the world waited. In the command post, no one spoke. Time stretched, silent and unbearable. Then, through static and distance, came the soft confirmation. Impact. Center mass. The tension in the room dissolved. Raven stayed still, her eyes steady through the scope until movement ceased. She lowered the rifle, released a slow breath, and spoke into the calm. Her tone quiet and even. Mission complete. It was over, and the desert was silent again. The moment the impact report came through, the silence inside the command post broke. The forward recon spotter confirmed the target was down. Center mass. No secondary movement detected. Analysts immediately began verifying the coordinates and logging the engagement. Radio operators marked the timestamp at 3:47 p.m. and transmitted the sitrep to higher command. Target secured. ROE compliance confirmed. The operations officer requested confirmation photographs for the intelligence file. While the recon team advanced to secure the site, no one celebrated. Every action followed procedure, steady and efficient. The analysts compiled the range, wind speed, and temperature data into the mission log. One officer checked that the report was classified under restricted access before encrypting the transmission. Captain Walker stood behind the console. Expression neutrale, issuing new orders to stand down and re-establish aerial recon when weather cleared. The mission was complete, and the operation was stable again. On the ridge, Raven lowered her rifle and flicked the safety on. She removed her earpiece, brushing the dust from its surface, then scanned the horizon for movement. The wind still howled across the plateau, carrying fine sand into her gear. She gathered her equipment, calm and methodical, leaving nothing behind but the faint impression of where perfection had just happened. Within an hour of the confirmed engagement, the ballistic data uploaded automatically to the Joint Special Operations Command server through encrypted channels. The system recorded range verification at 4,752 yards, wind data at 8 knots from the southwest, and a time of flight of 5.6 seconds. Analysts cross-checked the numbers for data integrity and tagged the report as SITREP final. The file was flagged for classification under compartmented operational security. Access limited to field command and technical oversight. Colonel Anthony Hayes reviewed the compiled document in the operations center, scanning each line of telemetry before adding his digital signature. Range verification confirmed. Data integrity validated. File sealed under JSOC Alpha access. The report was transmitted to the Department of Defense Long-Range Engagement Archive, joining fewer than a dozen confirmed shots in the same category. The event was logged as statistically improbable but verified. One analyst paused before closing the record, noticing a cross-reference in Raven 3's service file. The prior classified entry listed as Operation Hollow Echo, restricted, no détails accessibles. Yet the pattern was clear. 18 years of precision. Zero misses. As the file encrypted and disappeared into the classified network, the room fell quiet again. Professionalism masking the quiet reverence of witnessing something beyond standard training or skill. The sun had already dropped behind the ridge. When Raven returned to the forward operating base, the air smelled of dust and fuel, the kind of scent that stayed in every uniform long after a deployment ended. She carried her rifle case by the handle, her movements slow, deliberate, as if the weight of the day had settled into her bones. A few younger soldiers stopped to watch her walk through the gate, whispering to one another before one of them, Specialist Aaron Miller, gathered the courage to approach. He asked how she had made the shot, his voice a mix of awe and disbelief. Raven studied him for a moment before answering. She said she didn't guess. And she didn't hope. She calculated, waited, and let the wind agree with her math. Miller nodded. I'm not sure he understood, but certain he had just heard something important. Later, as she sat alone by the edge of the motor pool, Raven let herself breathe for the first time in hours. What she missed, she realized, wasn't the missions or the precision. It was the person she was before she learned how to do this. Before control became her only constant, she stood, slung the case over her shoulder, and walked away in silence. Years later, the story of Master Sergeant Rachel Raven Price found a quiet place in the halls of Fort Benning. Inside the advanced marksmanship training facility, her ballistic report hung behind glass. The numbers told their own story. 4,752 yards. Wind speed, barometric pressure, density altitude, all listed in precise detail. Beneath the chart, an inscription reminded every trainee who passed by that mastery was not about distance, but discipline. Instructors used her engagement as a lesson, quoting her calm words from the debrief. Control, not confidence. Patience, not force. They reminded recruits that she had waited 6 hours for a single breath to align with the wind. Near the far bench where she had once trained, someone had carved her words into the wood. Don't chase the shot. Let it come to you. Patience defeat distance. Among soldiers, her name spread quietly, never through official channels or public stories, but through respect earned by skill. Young snipers studied her range data like scripture. Realizing excellence was built through patience and consistency. Her call sign, Raven 3, remained active in the JSOC system, but never reassigned. It stayed that way by tradition. A silent reminder that precision can outlive its operator. The wind never stopped moving across the northern plateau. It carried sand over the rocks, smoothing the surface, erasing every trace of what had once been there. No footprints. No drag marks. No sign of the position where a single shot had changed everything. The desert forgot. But the people who understood precision did not. Her name never appeared in any briefing. Her record remained sealed. Yet her presence endured in the quiet discipline of those who came after. At Fort Benning, in the early hours before training began, young shooters adjusted their scopes and slowed their breathing, some without realizing they were copying her ritual. Every steady inhale, every calm pause before the trigger break carried a piece of her teaching. Instructors spoke of control more than courage, of patience more than aggression. They reminded their students that the greatest strength is not in the noise of victory, but in the silence before it, somewhere far from any base or range. The wind still worked at the same ground, where she once lay prone for 6 long hours. It erased the marks of her presence, but not her example. Raven's story became less about distance and more about mastery of self. The unshakable calm that turns chaos into precision, true greatness. She proved. Never asks for recognition. It simply waits for the right conditions, then acts without hesitation. So when you breathe, when you face your own moment of uncertainty, remember her lesson. Patience creates control. Silence creates strength. And if you believe calm is power, type respect.